thinks there should be controls or regulations around that, and whether Bill C-34 addresses it.
For Northumberland, Peterborough South.
We have to acknowledge the world that we live in today, not the world we lived in 20 years ago. There are challenging actors out there who are trying to take Canadian ideas and to utilize them for their own prosperity. We must control our ideas. We can't. We have to be straightforward and up forward with it, but we can't back away from the ideas. The Canadian ideas are Canadian, and they're there for Canadian prosperity.
Statements by members. Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, lack of access to sexual and reproductive health services is the greatest cause of women's disability, disease and death globally. In the 1995 UN Beijing Conference on Women, it was declared a human right, but is still an elusive sustainable development goal. Recent WHO data shows that 200 million women have no access to contraception, 300,000 still die each year in childbirth, and 25 million have to use unsafe abortion. 250 million people still get STDs. Girls continue to face forced early marriage and female genital mutilation. And though rape is a tactic of war, most women in conflict zones have no access to safe abortions. Although Canada is a global leader in SHRH international aid, every parliamentarian here should advocate for universal access to SHRH. Support the world's girls and women. Thank you.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. February 22nd is Pink Shirt Day, also known as Anti-Bullying Day. Bullying is a major problem in our schools, workplace, homes, and online. Pink Shirt Day aims to raise awareness of these issues as well as support programs that foster children's healthy self-esteem. Bullying has no place in our community and is something that no one should ever have to experience. Strong people stand up for themselves, but the strongest people stand up for others. So, this Pink Shirt Day, let's get together, wear pink, and stand up against bullying.
The honourable member for Kingston and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I'm honoured to recognize Chris Wiens, grade 7 class at École Module Vanier in my riding of Kingston and the Islands. Earlier this week on Valentine's Day, his class put together 18 Valentine's gift baskets, all made by hand, and delivered them to patients in the pediatric ward of Kingston General Hospital. This is the second year Chris Wiens' class has prepared Valentine's Day gift baskets for children who are in the hospital and not able to celebrate the day in the school with their friends. One student in the class reflected on their experience of being in the hospital as a child and how it can be a very scary experience, and how a simple gesture like this could make somebody's day a little bit better. I would like to thank Mr. Wiens and all the students in his grade 7 class at École Module Vanier for their act of kindness this past Valentine's Day, and for making that day a little bit better for the children at Kingston General Hospital in the pediatric ward. Thank you.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
Each year on February 14th, family members, survivors, and allies gather to honour missing murdered Indigenous women and girls 2S+. This Valentine's Day marks the 32nd annual Memorial March. It's been over 3 years since the final report on the missing murdered Indigenous women and girls inquiry was tabled. Another year passes. The crisis facing missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls 2S+ community is more urgent than ever. Shamefully, little action has been taken to implement the 231 calls for justice. Despite years of promises, there's still no for Indigenous, by Indigenous, northern, rural, and urban housing strategy. None of the $420 million announced in 2020 to build transitional housing and shelters in response to the national inquiry has rolled out. The inaction is costing lives. I'm so sad that I was not able to attend the march on Tuesday as I was in Ottawa grilling the Minister for Housing about the Liberals' inaction on the housing crisis. As ever, I remain committed to holding the government accountable in the fight for justice for all Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. The genocide must end. Indigenous women and girls cannot afford to wait another year to pass by.
The honourable member for Canada Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, Nelna Bessie John School is a school of just 5 students. It's located in remote Yukon on the traditional territory of the White River First Nation, part of Canada's most westerly community. The 5 students of the school have a deep love for hockey, and so they turn to social media to raise funds to see their first ever NHL game live and in person. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to share that these students raised enough money to travel to my riding of Canada Carleton to watch the Ottawa Senators take on the Calgary Flames. And what a game it was. The Senators won in overtime with an unforgettable game. The Senators went above and beyond, paying for each student's tickets, donating a jersey for each, and introducing the students to some of the players after the game. Talk about a dream come true. My thanks to the Ottawa Senators and all involved for making this student's first NHL game experience truly remarkable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, every day I receive countless messages from constituents saying they can't afford this government's tax and spend agenda, which burden Canadian families with the worst affordability crisis they've ever seen. Canadians are concerned about the increase in rural crime thanks to this government's soft-on-crime policies and massive backlogs in immigration that contribute to the shortage of workers. Despite the challenges and the negativity we've been facing, I would like to take this opportunity so we can refocus and remind ourselves of what truly matters in life, our families. This coming Monday is Family Day, a day to take the time to be with the ones we love, a day to cherish them and remember how priceless they are to us. However you choose to spend Family Day, remember, it's not about what you're doing, it's all about spending the day together with your family. Happy Family Day, everyone.
The honourable member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Each February, Mr. Speaker, my community of Windsor, Essex organizes a celebration of Black History Month that rivals any in the country. Close to 50 events to celebrate one of the oldest and most dynamic Black communities in Canada. Step into Sandwich First Baptist Church, the oldest active Black church in Canada. Trace the steps of American slaves crossing to freedom at the Amherstburg Freedom Museum. Listen to the Windsor Symphony Orchestra celebrate Black voices and Oscar Peterson. Honor Windsor's connection to the famed No. 2 Construction Battalion. Walk the McDougall Street corridor where Black culture and commerce thrived. Join Black Indigenous workers of color at Unifor Local 444. Listen to Killer Prize-winning author Suzette Mayer at Biblioasis. Support local Black businesses with the Buy Black 28-Day Challenge. And learn about innovators like engineer Cornelius Henderson, who helped build the Ambassador Bridge. To all back home, I wish a happy Black History Month. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, Black History Month is a time to reflect on our country's story and renew our engagement towards anti-Black racism. Black enslavement was widespread in colonial Canada until 1834. A century later, the residents of Africville, Nova Scotia, were denied services for decades before being forcibly removed from their homes and their community demolished. Systemic racism continues to be entrenched in our institutions to this day. These truths are painful and difficult to grapple with, and their harmful effects have been passed down for generations. But remembering the true stories, acknowledging the harm done, and taking collective actions are the only ways to steer our country towards a just society. This year's theme for Black History Month is Ours to Tell. To me, this speaks to the importance of elevating and celebrating Black voices in our conversations about race, history, and justice. I'm leaving you with the words of Thandiwe McCarthy, a Black change maker in my community and the former poet laureate for Fredericton, who had this call to action. Activism is a career choice, a lifestyle, a best friend. It is the dream and the reality. It is both a beginning and endless. You'll have nothing useful to progress, yet everything essential to build, So wrap yourself tightly around the darkness you want to change, and when you activate who you are, you'll find your sunlight.
The honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
While we were all enjoying Boxing Day, the frigid North Atlantic Ocean claimed the life of a 27-year-old lobster fisherman from Nova Scotia. Christian Atwood was lobstering off Cape Sable Island, setting the last trawl of traps when he was pulled overboard. He was 27 and has not been found. Christian leaves behind his beautiful 16-month-old son, Colson, his loving partner, Kristen, parents Carmela and Ralph, and his brothers Matthew and Joshua. Everyone who knew Christian remembers him as a fun-loving, cheerful guy and a great father. He was the light that shined in every room when he entered. His father, Ralph, told me he did not want his kids to go fishing because of the danger. But the draw of the ocean gets in your blood, and fishing was in Christian's soul. The vast unmarked grave of the ocean is no consolation for those family members who have people lost at sea. Christian's family are asking us in this place to do better, to make our fishermen safer at sea and bring them home. Christian, may you rest in peace.
The honourable member for Cloverdale Langley City.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next week, February 20th to 26th, is Heritage Week across Canada. In my home province of British Columbia, the Heritage Week theme is Always and Always, inviting citizens to explore and celebrate the culture and heritage of the communities that make up the places we each call home. Heritage Week is a time for all Canadians to reflect on how we can keep our heritage alive. MPs can play a role in protecting heritage places in our communities while also advancing reconciliation by supporting Bill C-23 during our next sitting week. When passed, Bill C-23 will create the Historic Places of Canada Act, which will add First Nations, Inuit, and Métis representation to the Historic Sites and Monuments Board of Canada. This action would implement Truth to Reconciliation Commission's Call to Action 79. Additionally, this legislation delivers on developing and implementing a national heritage plan and strategy for commemorating residential school sites, the history and legacy of residential schools, and the contributions of Aboriginal peoples to Canada's history. Therefore, I ask my colleagues to vote in favour of Bill C-23 to support our heritage, and I wish everyone a wonderful Heritage Week back in their communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cumberland Colchester.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to pay tribute to the African Nova Scotian community in Truro on the occasion of Black History Month, and to highlight the vast contributions that have been made to the growth and betterment of our country. The community traces its origins back to the middle of the 19th century. Most were descendants of Black loyalists. Some are also descendants of the Black refugees who fled America to escape slavery. Tragically, like many other Black communities in Canada, there was and continues to be racism. Despite these menacing challenges, incredible resiliency, ingenuity, and toughness are some of the defining characteristics of Truro's African Nova Scotian community. Many Canadian heroes are from this illustrious community, who I really wanted to highlight, but I'll get to that in a second, Mr. Speaker. William A. White, Rocky Jones, Art Dorrington, Portia White, and Jeremiah Jones. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to highlight Angie Parker Brown, a hero. Angie has ALS and has written a book with great adversity called Writing with My Eyes, Staying Alive While Dying. Sadly, Angie, we found out today, is in hospital and is quite unwell, and I ask all members of this House to say prayers for Angie and her family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Shepherd.
After 8 years of this Liberal government, Canada has never felt so polarized. That's not just my opinion. That's a senior Liberal MP who said the following: "Last, I think it's time to stop dividing Canadians, stop pitting one part of the population against another." He said, "I can't help but notice with regret that both tone and the policies of the government have changed drastically on the eve and during the last election campaign. A decision was made to divide, to stigmatize. It's time to stop with the division and the distractions." I couldn't agree more, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister would have you believe that your neighbour is your enemy. We're all feeling the financial pressure caused by this government's inflationary spending. 67% of Canadians believe that the country is broken. 56% of Canadians are concerned that they won't have enough money to retire. Canadians are out of money, and the Liberal government is out of touch. After 8 years of this broken government, it's clear that the only solution is a new majority Conservative government. Speaker, enough with the division and dividing for political gain. It's time to bring back hope to Canadians. Conservatives will unite Canadians for freedom. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this month, the U16 Bonnevital Angels Ringette team from South Winnipeg traveled to Ottawa to participate in the Gloucester-Cumberland National Ringette Tournament. Before the tournament began, I was pleased to welcome these remarkable young women to Parliament Hill. During their tour, I got the opportunity to better explain my role as their Member of Parliament and answer their thoughtful questions. We arrived before the sitting began, so they got up to the bar to view this chamber and got to witness the Speaker's parade. The highlight of the tour for many of the girls, I was told, was getting to take a quick peek into the Prime Minister's office. In the tournament, Mr. Speaker, the Angels did an incredible job representing Manitoba with a perfect 4-0 record in the round robin, and they ended up finishing in the top 4. Thank you to the parents and coaches for accompanying the Bonnevital Angels on their trip to Ottawa. I cannot wait to see what the future holds for these young athletes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. For years, there's been a secret world right next to us that we barely notice. Thousands of men and women without whom there would be no agriculture, slaughterhouses, processing, security, cooking, maintenance, or even care for our seniors. These people are indispensable, but they're invisible, without status, and living in precariousness and sometimes even exploitation. They do hard but essential work, and yet they're disposable, without the rights and protections we would expect. They're on the margins, far from their families, often stuck with employer-specific work permits that make them vulnerable. They're the temporary migrant workers. We've brought in 3 times more of them in Quebec since 2015, tens of thousands of people every year. The NDP's proposal is to grant them permanent residence. This would give them real recognition and hope. Last October, the Minister of Immigration said he was working on a vast program to regularize non-status people. This initiative is necessary. If we don't want to live in a society with 2 classes of workers, it's the only thing to do.
L'honorable député de Beauport.
The honourable member for Beauport, Côte-de-Beaupré, Île-d'Orléans, Charlevoix.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to pay a very emotional tribute to our friend Daniel Godet, who recently passed away. Fresh out of theatre school, an accident made him a quadriplegic, but he never let that stop him. He became an author, director, acting coach, writer, speaker, and creator of many projects, including his book Gaia, an improv league, a cross-Canada tour of his work like Superman, a 25th anniversary tribute to Cirque du Soleil, The Little Prince in Schools, or my own work La Vie du Temps, which Daniel brought from black and white into full color with his unique tints. Magical. An instinctive producer, together with his wife, he founded Le Crapet Soleil, coffee house and theatre, where performers included Cœur de Pirate, Louis-Jean Cormier, and Cyr le Coyote, who was inspired by Daniel's story to write and dedicate to him the song Le Ciel est backorder. Just as he learned he was about to become a father, he was diagnosed with cancer. He got a stem cell transplant and outlived all the prognoses. A true virtuoso of life, he used to tell us, life isn't a fight, it's a game. On behalf of the Bloc, our sincere condolences to Caro, Mika, his family, and his friends.
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
At the heart of any definition of leadership is the ability to unify people for a common purpose or cause. But after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians have never been more divided. He has used issues like mandates to pit Canadians against each other and distract from the issues and the problems he's caused. He believes that if you're afraid of your neighbor, you'll forget that you can't afford your rent or your groceries or even heat your home. Even his own MPs are calling him out for this divisive behavior. The brave Liberal member from Louis-Hébert suggested, and I quote, "From a positive and unifying approach, a decision was made to wedge, divide, and stigmatize. It's time to stop the divisions and distractions. It's time to be positive. It's time not to use coercive methods, but it's time for us to unite. I could not agree more. It's time for us to put the politics of division behind us and unite a country behind a Conservative Prime Minister who can bring prosperity back to Canada. It's time to turn hurt into hope. Yeah.
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As part of our government's plan to support Black Canadians across the country, we have previously announced a $200 million Black-led philanthropical endowment fund to improve social and economic outcomes for Black Canadians. Last week, I was proud to stand with the Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion and the Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Youth to announce the recipient of this fund. The Foundation for Black Communities, the FFBC, is a national Black-led, Black-serving organization with strong partnership whose proposal has received significant support from Black communities here in Canada. This foundational investment will help provide Black-led organizations with long-term sustainable funding and self-sustaining resources needed to build capacity for their organization. To better serve Black Canadians communities, I would like to offer my heartfelt congratulations to the FFBC for their successful application and wish them all the best in their ongoing effort to support and uplift Black Canadians community across the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Before proceeding, just want to remind people, and petit rappel, que les déclarations.
Statements are only supposed to be 60 seconds long, 1 minute.
Not more than 1 minute. Thank you very much. Oral questions, question orale. The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
This Prime Minister thinks that if you're afraid of your neighbour, you might forget that you can't afford your rent, to feed yourself, or to heat your home. But don't take my word for it. The Liberal MP for Louis Hébert has called out this divide and conquer strategy. He said, it's time to stop dividing Canadians and stop pitting one part of the population against the other. Speaker, we couldn't agree more. Will the Prime Minister take his own MP's advice and stop tearing our great country apart?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government has been there for Canadians during this difficult time of global economic uncertainty. We are rallying Canadians, and they are working harder than ever. In fact, 150,000 jobs were created in January alone, and women's participation rate in the economy is at a historic high. Canadians are standing together, side by side, in order to make it through these times.
For Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Side by side, the Liberal member for Louis Hébert said a decision was made to divide and stigmatize. That's exactly what this Prime Minister has done. Working people are struggling to pay their bills, and Liberal insiders, they're getting rich. Urban Canadians have been pitted against their rural neighbours. This Prime Minister even labelled Canadians who disagreed with him as racist and misogynist. When will this Prime Minister follow the lead of Canada's Conservatives, who will unite Canadians instead of dividing and stigmatizing?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I have enormous respect for the member, but I'm surprised that we would be talking down the Canadian economy at a time where we have record investment coming in our country. Mr. Speaker, I think my colleagues is forgetting that, for example, we rebuild the whole biomanufacturing sector. We got investment like Moderna in Canada, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we got further investment when it comes to the battery ecosystem. Now, Bloomberg ranks Canada second in the world, just after China, ahead of the United States. Mr. Speaker, we have the first gigafactory in Canada to build batteries, and we built the largest hydrogen plant just in Edmonton. Mr. Speaker, it's going well.
Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, Rideau Lakes.
Well, I don't think that the people who can't afford to feed themselves or heat their homes, who've experienced their rent or mortgage doubling, the 20% of Canadians who are skipping meals, the 1.5 million Canadians who are lined up at food banks would say that it's going well. But that's the tactic from these Liberals. They tell you that even though you can't afford to feed yourself, you've never had it so good. Let them eat cake, this Prime Minister says. The Liberal member for Louis Hébert said it's time to stop with the divisions and the distractions like that one. It's time to use positive, not coercive methods. It's time to unite. And that's what Conservatives will do, from Victoria, BC to Victoria by the Sea. When are they going to follow our lead?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Tourism.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, I think Canadians see that this particular Conservative Party has zero credibility on the economy. Their economic policy can be summed up by gutting the Canada Pension Plan, gutting employment insurance, abandoning our fight against climate change, and of course, investing in cryptocurrency as a way to opt out of inflation. It is entirely irresponsible, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Mégantic-L'Érable.
Monsieur le Président, après 8 ans.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years with this Liberal Prime Minister, his policies to divide Canadians have only succeeded in breaking everything he touches. The Prime Minister thinks that by dividing Canadians, that they'll forget that groceries are more expensive, that families can't make ends meet, that many youth have given up their dream to ever own a home. The member for Louis-Hébert said that a decision was made by their government to divide and stigmatize. Why have the Liberals have decided that it's best to divide and conquer? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to hear from politicians who claim that we're using division and who use it themselves. Every political party should be acting as a unifier. We should all be working together. We should all recognize that we have different positions, but that we can work together. That's our goal with the government. We're all going to work together. The Honourable Member from Mégantic-L'Érable. After 8 years, he even succeeded in dividing his own caucus, Mr. Speaker. There's not a day that goes by without a member like the one who just spoke, or a former minister, or any kind of Liberal denounces this government's decisions to prop up his own leadership and apply his divisive policies within his own party, and it seems to work, unfortunately. It's time to work. Will he admit his responsibility, stop dividing Canadians, or just get out of the way to allow the Conservatives to unite Canadians, to give them back a little bit of hope? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, let's talk about responsibility. The Conservative economic policy can be summarized as abandoning our fight against the climate crisis, attacking EI, attacking support for seniors, and suggest that Canadians invest in cryptocurrency. We are a responsible government, and we have a responsible plan. Thank you. The Honourable Member from Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to health, this government is unbelievably arrogant. 10 days after forcing Quebec and the provinces to accept an offer that covers 1/6 of the needs for our hospitals, they're demanding accountability and is forcing them to accept in writing its conditions and submit action plans, or else those meager sums will be cut off. Mr. Speaker, how many hospitals is the federal government managing? None. It does not have the slightest bit of expertise. So is it going to transfer the money?
L'honorable ministre du Santé Mentale.
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health. Mr. Speaker, this is a key time for Canada. We are delighted by the announcement made by the Council of the Federation, and we thank them for their important work. Discussions are based on the way we can work together to improve health care for the benefit of families and healthcare workers. The Honourable Member from Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, the federal government's continuing to play political games with conditions for healthcare. But while it plays Sorcerer's Apprentice, Quebecers are waiting. I'm talking about people who can't see a doctor, people on waiting lists for surgery, nurses who are exhausted. The money the federal government has promised is insufficient, but could it at least give it to our healthcare professionals who know how things work and can actually use it? Mr. Speaker, our plan has 3 key commitments to obtain funding, as well as an increase. We have a collective agreement on sharing and use of essential information on health in order to achieve our goals.
Mr. Speaker, all Canadians deserve to retire and live with dignity. But the Liberals' underfunding has left seniors struggling to make ends meet. Seniors are telling me that they can't pay rent and they can't afford groceries. They're terrified that they'll be living on the streets. The Liberals' failures to support seniors is making them feel alone and like no one cares. Will the government increase the guaranteed income supplement and give seniors some hope?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Seniors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my friend for the question. We recognize the challenges that seniors are facing, and our government has been there for them. In fact, our government is helping seniors who are struggling by doubling the GST tax credit, by providing dental and rental support. We've also increased the OAS for seniors aged 75 and over. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we will continue to be there for all Canadians, including seniors and the most vulnerable seniors.
Here. The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
My community is struck with grief after the loss of 2 Londoners in house fires while on wait lists for long-term care. Tragically, this is all too common. Private beds are out of reach for many of my constituents, and the not-for-profit care homes have over 1,000 people on the wait list. Their only choice is to remain at home despite safety concerns. Across Canada, people are dying while waiting for a bed in our patchwork, understaffed, and overburdened long-term care system. These tragedies are preventable. This government needed to step up, but there was no mention of long-term care in their offer to premiers. Why?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for the question. We welcome the new standards released by Health Standards Organization and Canadian Standards Associations, which are the result of extensive consultations across the country. Mr. Speaker, we have provided up to $4 billion to support provinces and territories in their efforts to improve long-term care in their jurisdictions. With this important step taken, we look forward to seeing a bill introduced in the House very soon. And of course, today we see negotiations with the provinces and territories happening as we speak. Nice job.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, Canadians are increasingly feeling like Canada is broken. Instead of owning up to his failures, the Prime Minister has called people names and pitted Canadians against each other. Friends, family, co-workers who to this day won't talk to each other because of how this Prime Minister has stoked divisiveness. Why does this Prime Minister continue to divide and distract Canadians from his failures?
Here, here. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the work of the member opposite. I simply do not understand why it is that when we try to improve the situation of Canadians, on 2 different occasions, Mr. Speaker, we reduced taxes for middle-class Canadians and the Conservatives voted against. On 2 different occasions, we reduced taxes on small business owners, Mr. Speaker, and the Conservatives voted against that as well. We've been investing in Canadians, and the $10 a day childcare agreement is the latest example. Why won't the Conservatives be there for Canadians when they need it most?
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member opposite clearly didn't take lessons when her colleague, the Liberal member for Louis Hébert, called on this Liberal government to stop dividing Canadians, to stop pitting one part of the population against another, to stop with the division, to stop with the distractions. Our Conservative leader's positive message is enough divide and conquer, unite Canadians. Again, why does this Prime Minister continue to divide and distract Canadians from his failures?
Here. The Honourable Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
No lessons from these Conservatives. If there's one Canadian who has stoked fear in our society, is the leader of the Conservative, Mr. Speaker. And Canadians watching at home on Friday know that, Mr. Speaker. This is time to unite Canadians. This is time to talk about Canada, to talk up Canada. We are winning around the world. We are having record investment in this country. Every parliamentarian here should talk up Canada, Mr. Speaker. It's not time to stoke fear. It's time to unite Canadians, to seize the moment and be ambitious.
We had a really good start. That was pretty good. The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
He said it's time to stop dividing Canadians. And what's happened in the last year, Canadians haven't been more divided than ever. Inflation's at a 40-year high, 50% of Canadians are cutting on groceries, rent is up, and mortgage costs are up, except you can't question these issues. You're called unpatriotic by this government.
Canadians are struggling and the Prime Minister wants to keep dividing. How come this government won't even take the advice of its own Liberal MP?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is right. Canadians are struggling, and Canadians don't seem to understand why the Conservative Party doesn't want to help them. We have put forward measures in order to support Canadians through this difficult time, whether it's doubling of the GST tax credit, our rental supports, our dental supports for children, which have helped over 200,000 children go to the dentist, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives voted against that measure. I think that the Conservative Party needs to look themselves in the mirror and decide how it is that they can actually help improve the situation in this country rather than voting down measures that support Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we did support the government with the GST supplement that is actually running out now. What we didn't support was a process to distribute dental and rental benefits by a process that's been called into question by the Parliamentary Budget Officer and the Auditor General, who says it increases the risk of fraud. But if you listen to everybody else, this government says all these issues are someone else's problems. They happen outside of Canada. That means that this government doesn't believe it has the responsibility or the ability to fix the problems that they cause. So will the government finally take responsibility for the issues that they've caused?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Honourable Member for his question, but I seem to feel that we need to remind the Conservatives that it's this government that decided in 2016 to take a true strategy on poverty in this country. Right. This government implemented the CCB that lifted 3.5 million families out of struggles. 6 million children were helped by that program. They voted against it. Mr. Speaker, this is a government that has implemented childcare, subsidized, affordable, high-quality childcare across this country from coast to coast to coast. Yet they grudgingly support that. They don't know what they support, but they don't support Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
Order. 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 Ask questions. Get on the list to ask questions. The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of Liberal failure, more Canadians feel that our country is broken in so many ways. The Prime Minister doesn't want to hear it and tries to deny it, but it's true. He blames the rest of the world and shames other people for the problems that his Liberal government created. Instead of dividing Canadians against each other to distract from Liberal failure, will he finally take some responsibility and let Conservatives fix what he broke?
Yeah!
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, it's honestly quite disturbing to hear a member of Parliament talking about Canada being broken, Mr. Speaker. At a time where you see division in the world, let's unite together to build up Canada, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about our economy. Let's talk about what we're doing for Canadians. Let's be together, Mr. Speaker, not to stoke fear, but to stoke hope in Canadians. That's what we're doing on this side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker. We know Canadians know we have their back. We will continue to work for them at every step of the way.
The Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Well, the 1.5 million Canadians who are using the food bank now that it never had before, they'd have something different to say than what he had to say. Right. The government can ignore the opposition all that they want, but one of their own Liberal members called out their government last year, and I'll quote, "Both tone and the policies of my government changed drastically on the eve and during the last election campaign. From a positive and unifying approach, a decision was made to wedge, to divide, and to stigmatize." Wow. One more time, Mr. Speaker, when will they take responsibility for what they broke?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry.
Again, Canadians are watching. You know, just what you hear this morning, it's all about broken, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about building together, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're doing on this side, and I think every member of Parliament wants to do that. Let's look at what we've done together. We've been there for seniors. We've been there for children, Mr. Speaker. We've been there to help Canadians when they need it most. And at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we rebuilt our industrial policy. We landed significant deals when it comes to the aerospace industry. We have the largest hydrogen plant in North America in Edmonton, Mr. Speaker. Things are working well. We need to work together to help Canadians.
The Député de la Pointe de l'Île.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, let's go back a few scenes in the famous West Island story. The member for Saint-Laurent spread falsehoods about Anglophones no longer being able to receive care in their language because of the Charter of the French language, which is completely false. but all the Quebec Liberals defended it. Will one of them finally stand up today and say that what the member said was false and that Anglophones will be able to continue to receive care in their language if we vote for C-13? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Official Languages. I want to thank my colleague for the question. It's clear that we're the first government to recognize the decline of French in Quebec and all throughout Canada. It's important with Bill C-13 to add teeth to support communities in a minority situation throughout the country. So I encourage every member in this place to make sure that Bill C-13 passes as quickly as possible. It's important for official language minority communities, and I hope the Bloc Québécois will join us, because right now it looks like they're going to vote against C-13, and that's not acceptable. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. C-13 weakens French in Quebec right now. A dozen Quebec Liberals are thinking about voting against their own bill. There's still a few characters to be revealed in this West Island story, but we know some of them. For example, the member for Saint-Laurent, the member for Saint-Léonard, the member for Mount Royal. These MPs oppose the basic recognition of the Charter of the French language in C-13. These same MPs in 2021 were among the dozen or so who abstained from voting to recognize the existence of Quebec as a nation. Do you think that's a coincidence? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's clear that, yes, there's a decline in French in Quebec and Canada, and that's why it's important for C-13 to pass. Once again, I don't understand the Bloc Québécois opposition who want to kill C-13, who are doing everything they can to not support official language minority communities throughout the country. As a proud Franco-Ontarian, I'm still looking for the support from the Bloc Québécois to make sure that Bill C-13 passes, because, yes, it's important for the decline of French. We need to work together. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Beijing's communist agents engaged in a sophisticated strategy of manipulation and disinformation to wage a ground war on our democracy and on our elections. That's not me saying it. That's on the front page of the Globe and Mail. They report a Conservative MP was targeted for daring to champion to establish a foreign agent registry to plug a national security hole. This government's broken, hasn't done anything. Did the Prime Minister turn a blind eye to foreign interference because he stood to gain from it politically?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs.
Absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. Our government has been clear from the beginning that foreign interference is a serious threat to this country. It's precisely why we've taken action. The Conservatives seem to only wake up to this fact when they think it's politically advantageous. Meanwhile, on this side of the House, we have put in place measures like the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, a site committee, the Critical Election Preparedness Committee. Mr. Speaker, we will work to improve our democratic institutions and secure them while Conservatives play politics.
Nice job. Honourable Member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Mr. Speaker, the people playing politics is Beijing and its communist agents in Canada, while this government does nothing about it. It knows and it doesn't tell Canadians that there's been serious accounts of foreign interference. The Globe and Mail reports a CSIS source of direct interference, including illegal donations, communist agents directing volunteers, a Beijing embassy official taking credit for the defeat of 2 Conservative MPs. And the Prime Minister has said in Parliament the task force determined that the integrity of our elections was not compromised in 2019 or 2021. CSIS says the opposite. So who is telling the truth, the Prime Minister or CSIS?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
And Conservatives, it was actually our government who closed financing loopholes that their Unfair Elections Act actually kept left wide open for foreign interference. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, let's remind Canadians what CSIS and our national security community has said. They have said that there was no activity that compromised the integrity of our elections. So, Mr. Speaker, let me ask, are the Conservatives going to work with us to continue to strengthen our institutions, or are they continue to do China's bidding and undermine the trust in our democratic institutions?
L'honorable député de Mégantic-L'Érable.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear that the Prime Minister said last November that Canadians can be reassured that the integrity of our elections was protected. He was talking about the 2019-2021 elections today in the Globe and Mail. It's not the Conservatives saying it. The Globe and Mail has brought forward troubling facts. Agents of the communist regime are working actively to promote the election of a Liberal minority government, and they did that in 2021. They are leading misinformation campaigns against Conservative campaigns, and it goes on. Did the Prime Minister close his eyes deliberately on this because it led to an advantage for him? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Conservatives were paying attention back when we took office. We were putting in place measures to strengthen our democracy. Conservatives only seem to be awake to issues of foreign interference when it seems politically advantageous. But, Mr. Speaker, this is precisely why we have been saying time and time again that the threat of foreign interference is persistent, it's ongoing, it's why we need to continually be addressing this. Mr. Speaker, I urge the Conservatives to actually work together with solutions instead of working with China to undermine the trust in our democracy.
The Honourable Member. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-l'Érable.
Solving it, Mr. Speaker. Les tactiques que parle le rapport du SRS.
The tactics in CSIS report included donations to political campaigns and getting business owners to hire students to do volunteer work for campaigns. Donors sympathetic to the regime are encouraged to provide contributions to candidates favored by China. The Prime Minister knew during the last election that the Chinese Communist regime was involved in misinformation, especially in 2 ridings. The Prime Minister stated to the House of Commons that the integrity of our elections had not been undermined in 2019 and 2021, but CSIS's report shows the opposite. Who is telling the truth?
Of emergency preparedness.
Speaker, the member opposite, I'd just like to take an opportunity to refresh his memory. On December 18th in 2020, I wrote that member a letter, and every member in this House, advising them about the threat of foreign interference, and particularly the threat that China represented to our political integrity. That information was shared with every member of this House, and bringing it to your attention. As well, we articulated the steps that this government was taking to protect our democratic institutions. Mr. Speaker, this government has been alive and alert to that threat and has taken action to protect our institutions.
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have some of the most expensive cell phones compared to other G7 countries, and the cost of living crisis is only making it more difficult for Canadians. The minister is letting Canadians suffer with higher bills as he drags out the decision on the Rogers-Shaw merger. Rogers gobbling up Shaw means less competition, less choice, higher bills, and worse service for families. Why is the minister taking so long to defend Canadians to stop the merger? He has all the evidence and the support of the NDP to stop this greedflation. Why won't he act?
The Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for the question. It's a bit rich to hear from the NDP that because I am fighting for Canadians that I'm not defending them, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly why I'm saying that I will render a decision in due course. And I've said all along, Mr. Speaker, the only things that matter is to fight to bring price down. And the way we have achieved that in Canada is through competition, is to have a strong fourth national player. Mr. Speaker, Canadians know that the time that I'm taking is the time that I'm taking to fight for them, and I will continue to do that.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, everyone deserves to feel safe in their community. My riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith is a stunning coastal community full of kind, hardworking people. But more and more people are feeling unsafe. Crime is connected with people struggling, poverty, insufficient housing, and mental health supports. We're living with the symptoms of a broken criminal justice system that treats crime like the cause, not a consequence of lacking basic human rights. Will the Liberals keep our communities safe by ensuring people have mental health supports, guaranteed income, and restorative justice?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for that question, and I can assure her that our government's been working on very smart criminal justice reforms that is meant to keep our communities safe. We brought forward Bill C-5 that will essentially address issues of systemic racism within the criminal justice system. We introduced Bill C-40 yesterday, which is Criminal Conviction Review Commission, which is meant to ensure that those who are wrongfully accused and convicted have a way out, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to work on smart criminal justice policy.
Good job. Honourable member for Don Valley North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's estimated 222 million children and adolescents are not developing the essential skills and knowledge they need to build and prepare for their futures that they would otherwise in school. Children and young adolescents are feeling the impact of COVID-19 and face displacement from natural disaster and conflicts. Can the Minister of International Development share with this House how Canada is investing in immediate, sustainable programs to ensure access to quality education for children and youth in emergency crisis situations so that no child is left behind? Good question.
Minister of Emergency.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for his advocacy for this very important issue and his hard work on this issue. Mr. Speaker, all children and youth have the right to quality education and a chance for a better future. That is why our government is pledging $87.5 million over 4 years to Education Cannot Wait, the United Nations Global Fund for Education in Emergencies and Protracted Crises. Our contribution will provide support to 20 million crisis-affected children in accessing quality education, particularly girls and adolescent girls living in hard-to-reach places and fragile and conflict-affected areas. Thank you.
The honourable member for Foothills.
Over 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, farmers across Canada are just taking hit after hit. Increases in a punishing carbon tax, tariff on fertilizer, removal of vital crop protection products. Farmers can't take much more. Oh, but wait, there is more. Farmers got notice this week that they're facing yet another Liberal tax, this time on underutilized homes. This could cost Canadian farm and ranch families tens of thousands of dollars. Wow. Why is this government punishing farmers yet again with another Liberal tax?
Why, Frank? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for his question. This government has always had the backs of farmers. Cash receipts are up. Obviously, climate change is costing farmers many dollars. On 30% of grains didn't make it to the market last year because of climate change. We're assisting farmers to make that transition, and we'll always be there to defend our farmers, and we should be proud of what the farmers do for us. Thank you.
The Honourable Member of Foothills.
Well, this just shows how out of touch this Liberal government is if they are defending farmers by using them as an ATM to pay for their out-of-control spending. Right. Most farm and ranch families have multi-generational homes on their properties. This tax will cost them tens of thousands of dollars. Even if the tax does not apply to them, the Liberals are threatening with fines up to $10,000 if they don't do the paperwork. Isn't it enough? This Liberal government is milking Canadian farmers with carbon taxes and punitive policies. Will the Liberals give farmers a break and exempt agriculture from yet another Liberal tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our government has always defended farmers and will always be there for farmers. Obviously, there's always some issues that will arise, and I've mentioned climate change has been a major issue for farmers, affecting farmers, whether it was in eastern Canada or out west with the droughts. We'll always be there to defend farmers, and I'll be happy to work with the honourable member on the issue that he's raised. Thank you.
The honourable member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
After 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, everything feels broken. Just yesterday, the Governor of the Bank of Canada confirmed that the carbon tax is adding a full 0.5 percentage point to inflation. While Canadians are struggling just to feed themselves, these Liberals are now planning to triple the carbon tax, making inflation even worse. When will the Prime Minister take responsibility for the inflation he caused, axe the tax, or move out of the way so Conservatives can fix the problem?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my honourable friend from Manitoba for the question, and he will know that there's actually good news for families on the prairies, Mr. Speaker. As of April 1st, a family of 4 will receive up to $1,000 in Manitoba in the climate action rebate, Mr. Speaker. And referring to the Governor of the Bank of Canada, Mr. Speaker, he estimated that perhaps 0.1% will be related to the price on pollution in terms of inflation, Mr. Speaker. That is 1 cent for every $10. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Mr. Speaker, the carbon tax is all pain and no gain. They've never met a single target that they've set for themselves. It's a tax plan, not an environmental plan. Now, after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, everything feels broken. Yesterday in committee, the bank governor confirmed that taxpayers will have to bail out the Bank of Canada. Wow. While Canadians are struggling to eat, heat, and house themselves, with these Liberals, the Bank of Canada comes first. When will the Prime Minister take responsibility for breaking the bank and get out of the way so Conservatives can fix the problem?
Yeah!
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as usual, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are distorting the facts. Our emissions are going down, Mr. Speaker. We're on track to meet our targets, which are in 2030, Mr. Speaker. What did the Conservatives do when they were in power, Mr. Speaker? Absolutely nothing. For 10 long years, they did nothing on climate change. They abandoned the Kyoto Accord. They cut $350 million from the environment and climate change budget, Mr. Speaker. They gutted our environmental laws. And now, Mr. Speaker, they're blaming us for their inaction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député de Trois-Rivières.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, the Globe and Mail has revealed the scope of China's interference in the 2021 federal election. The Secret Services detailed an entire campaign with illegal election funding and media manipulation. It's very concerning, but it would be a mistake to make this a partisan issue and question the election's legitimacy. The real problem is the facility with which foreign powers could manipulate our elections. We need to take action with transparency, but instead, for months, the government has been denying everything and hiding the truth. Will this government finally take the threat seriously? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I welcome the Bloc's intervention today and the willingness to work with us on this side of the House. Mr. Speaker, the pervasiveness of foreign interference is serious. It's why we've taken action, but there is more work to be done. It should not be a partisan issue. Every single Canadian should want everyone in this House to take this issue seriously. And Mr. Speaker, some of the loopholes we've closed were things like foreign campaign funding, tighter rules on third-party advertising. These are some of the loopholes used around the world. We're going to continue to work with all parliamentarians to address this.
The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, China's election interference is a threat to democracy, and neither partisanship nor denial will help us to beat it. We must all ensure that our elections are safe from foreign manipulation. But this government is hiding the truth from the public. Not only was it aware, but it discussed the issue with allied countries. It knows that candidates received illegal funding. And it knows which candidates. It even reimbursed those sums. When will it understand that we cannot beat Chinese interference by being just as opaque as China?
Ministre des Affaires intergouvernementales.
Mr. Speaker, of course we know that foreign interference exists. This is what we've been talking about since we've been in office. It's precisely why we have put forward several measures to strengthen our democracy, our democratic institutions, and ensuring that our elections are free and fair. Mr. Speaker, foreign interference happens to countries around the world. We work with our partners and our allies on how we can counter it, and I encourage all members of this House to bring forward solutions instead of behaving recklessly like the Conservatives who use national security as a partisan issue.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Échemins-Lévis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quebec is concerned about C-11, and it sent the government a letter, and there was also a unanimous motion in the National Assembly. Quebec's demands are simple. Include in Bill C-11 that Quebec will be consulted on the possible CRTC powers. But we have gotten a no answer from the Liberal Bloc Québécois Alliance. We are the only ones who are bringing forward Quebec's legitimate requests. Will this government bring together a parliamentary committee to debate Quebec's proposal? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Heritage.
Looking at my watch, it's 2023. Where's the Honourable Member been the last year when this has been debated before the House and the Senate? Actors, authors, composers, producers, musicians, singers from Quebec are on side. They want to see the bill passed. And by the way, Mr. Speaker, the Quebec National Assembly has even unanimously requested twice in May 2021 and June 2022 to expedite this bill. Where have the Conservatives been? Filibustering this legislation the entire way. On this side of the House, we're here for artists.
L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Well, Mr. Speaker, with the support of the Bloc Québécois, things are getting done without listening to Quebec, and this Liberal government is continuing with its unilateral authoritarian approach, giving more power to the federal cabinet to tell Quebecers what the CRTC will let them listen to. The Bloc Québécois supports this. We don't agree. Will the Liberal Bloc Québécois Alliance finally listen to Quebec? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, today we learned 240 jobs have been cut in the media sector in Quebec. That's 200 families that have lost revenue that they were counting on. Our hearts are with them. But this is happening too often. It's time tech giants pay their fair share towards our culture. It's time to level the playing field. Right. C11 is about that. But what have the Conservatives been doing the last year? Filibuster. The honourable member's own seatmate acknowledged in the House of Commons that she's been filibustering this whole time. Where has the honourable member been this last year to stand up to Quebecers and Canadians and artists across the country? He's been absent.
Absent. Of the Deputy Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, this government should show more consistency. On the one hand, they say we filibustered, but on the other, they say that we haven't been there at all. We've been ignoring the issue. Both of those things can't be true at once, but in fact, neither is true. We have been doing our work as parliamentarians. And as we speak, the National Assembly of Quebec is asking to be listened to by this government on C11 to ensure that Quebec has a voice at the table. The Bloc Québécois seems to agree with the idea of giving all the powers to the federal government, but we want Quebec to be listened to. We've been asking this for 5 days. Will the government bring together a parliamentary committee to listen to Quebec and the Senate amendments?
Honorable Secrétaire parlementaire au ministre du Patrimoine canadien.
The Canadian Heritage Committee has been there for a year discussing this, both in the House and in the Senate. This honourable member has been absent and has just taken notice this week that after the past year of debating this. While in Quebec, artists have called upon the government. The National Assembly has twice called upon this Parliament to expedite Bill C11. But all that we've seen from the other side is delay, blocking, filibustering. No solutions from the other side. It's amazing that he steps up this week and says he cares, but the last year he's been silent.
Okay.
The honourable member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, immigration is an essential value in Canada. It reflects the cultural mosaic that builds the identity of our country. And Francophone immigration is even more undeniable in its contribution to our linguistic, demographic, and economic wealth. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship tell us about updates on what is being done to attract more Francophone immigrants to Canada? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for Sudbury for her question. I'm very proud to announce today that our government has reached its target, 4.4% Francophone immigration outside Quebec. In 2022, we welcomed 16,300 new arrivals, Francophone arrivals outside Quebec. That's an increase of 450% since we've been in power, Mr. Speaker, and that's just the beginning. There's still a great deal to do to promote French in Canada, and we will do that work. Thank you.
For Yellowhead.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal Prime Minister, Jan, a small business owner in Entwistle, is struggling under the oppressive carbon tax. With the cost of food, heating, and fuel skyrocketing, it's becoming harder for Jan and countless Canadians across the country to make ends meet. Conservatives will continue to keep the heat on and fight this tax to help all Canadians like Jan. Mr. Speaker, when will this government axe the carbon tax?
Great question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Tourism.
Mr. Speaker, the price on pollution that our government introduced, or if the Conservatives prefer to call it a carbon tax, I'm happy to do so, It is actually a market-based mechanism. It's a capitalism-based mechanism that all experts agree is the most effective at fighting climate change. Mr. Speaker, even the Conservative Party temporarily campaigned on a price on pollution. Mr. Speaker, I think we can all agree that this is the most effective way to fight climate change and that Canadians are asking us to fight climate change in order to protect our planet for the future and for our children.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, Canadians can no longer afford to eat, heat, or house themselves. The situation is about to get worse. With the tripling of the carbon tax, seniors must choose between eating and heating. Conservatives will fight to turn the tax off so seniors can keep the heat on. So, I ask this Prime Minister, will he show compassion and remove the carbon tax?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the Honourable Member for the question. After 7 years and 3 months, we have been able to make significant progress for seniors. But don't take my word for it, Mr. Speaker. Take that member's word for it. The Conservative member from King Vaughan just last week was highlighting the other day at committee how poverty rates have dramatically decreased since we formed government in 2015. When we came into government, we made a decision to invest in seniors. We immediately reinstated the age of retirement back to 65. Mr. Speaker, that member would have had seniors work 2 full years to get the benefits that they paid for decades. That's right.
The honourable member for King Vaughan.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if he had listened to the whole entire question, he would have answered it properly. They cut out the part where I asked how much did CERB impact that figure. That's what Stats Canada asked. Sheila, a senior from Midland, would like to know why this government refuses to answer questions. Seniors demand accountability from the Liberal government. They are all talk and no action. Will this Prime Minister understand the benefit that seniors have brought to this country, show some compassion, let the Conservatives come and fix what they've broken?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, every day the Conservatives stand up and pretend to care about seniors. Day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out, since 2015, they've stood to vote against everything that we've done for seniors in this country for 7 years, 3 months. You can't stand up every year and vote against the things that we do for seniors and then pretend to care about seniors. I'll tell you, Canadian seniors know a whole lot better.
The honourable member for Bonavista, Buren, Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, tax season is coming. Year after year, millions of Canadians file their tax returns. And in doing so, they gain access to multiple benefits that make a real difference in their lives. Could the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Revenue tell us more about the importance, but also the advantages of filing our tax returns in time?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
First of all, let me commend the member who brings to this House 29 years of experience as an educator in this community. Years of experience as a mayor and most recently co-chair of the Seniors Caucus on this side of the aisle. He is right. On the 20th of this month, Canadians can begin filing their taxes. It's absolutely essential to do so to get access to vital benefits, including the Canada Child Benefit, the Canada Dental Benefit, and the Canada Workers Benefit, among many other examples. Mr. Speaker, they have until May 1st to do so. It's vital to the social safety net, but it's vital to Canadian individuals and families too. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Vancouver East.
New Democrats pushed the Liberals to deliver a one-time $500 housing benefit to low-income renters. But now the Liberals are saying people on income assistance or disability assistance whose rent is paid directly to landlords are not eligible. They are amongst the most vulnerable in our community, and we're in the middle of a housing crisis, and families are struggling to afford to put food with the rising cost of living. They need this help now. Will the Liberals stop penalizing people on income assistance or disability assistance and withdraw this discriminatory requirement?
L'honorable Secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for all her hard work on housing, as well as the $500 top-up. The eligibility criteria that we all adopted, not the Conservatives, of course, last October, have not changed, and I will be very pleased to continue working with my colleague to ensure that this money goes to the most vulnerable.
For Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, this week I met with Syrian community members in Waterloo Region who are reeling from the loss of loved ones in last week's earthquake. Those who survived this disaster are without access to hospitals, medicine, food, heating, electricity, or clean water. Syrian and Turkish Canadians are desperate to bring their loved ones to safety, but they need Canada's help today. They're calling on the government to expedite existing immigration files and to make it easier to sponsor their family members. When will the Minister of Immigration make this happen?
The Honourable Minister of International Development.
Speaker, I want to thank the member for this question, and our hearts go out to all the people and families who are affected by this horrible earthquake that's taken place in Turkey and in Syria. I've actually been in touch with many Canadian NGOs who are actually either working in Syria or trying to get support into Syria. Our government has already pledged a matching fund and an additional $10 million, and I can assure the member that our government will be doing more. Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for question period today. And I believe we have a few points of order, so I'm going to work them this way. L'honorable député de Louis Saint-Laurent.
The honourable member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During QP, in response to the question from the member for Yellowhead, the parliamentary secretary to the finance minister said the Conservatives are talking about the carbon tax. I'd like to point out that it's the Liberal carbon tax we're talking about. That's not a point of order.
The honourable member for Foothills on a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On Tuesday, when I asked a question of the Minister of Agriculture about the impact of carbon tax on farms, she accused me of spreading misinformation and misquoting. She did the same thing. Just give me a moment, I'll get there. The same thing to my colleague from Battle River, Crowfoot. And I would like the opportunity, and I know that the Speaker has been asked to rule on a point of order from my colleague from Calgary, Shepherd, but I would like unanimous consent to table a document, the report published by 4 Canadian universities titled Canada's Food Price Report, which, Mr.